Andy Johnson. This is some tips on how to read a quantitative research article. Most people do not read articles straight through from beginning to end. We look at a couple things and then we go back and read in a recursive manner. So I'm just going to think out loud as I read through this article. But we always start with the abstract. That gives us a sense of what the study was about and the results. Very important. The present study examined the long-term effects of instruction on reading achievement of children diagnosed as having learning disabilities and were taught in resources room. Okay, resource rooms. That's interesting. Okay, I'll come back to this a little bit later. Let's see what the results were. Results of the study indicated that LD resource room instruction did not improve word recognition or comprehension skills of children with LD. Students experienced a significant decline in spelling scores after receiving instructions for 3 and 6 years. Children also show a decline in verbal IQ scores after receiving LD instruction for 6 years. Oh, this sounds interesting. And I am a literacy professor, so I'm interested in that. And I want to get a sense of the numbers. And I see here, okay, 230 and 64. Okay. That tells me it wasn't done with just 3 or 4 or 10 students, that there was an adequate sample size to come to some sort of conclusion. Now I'm going to bring this back. Most people, when they read an article, they do that. And the literature review. The literature review is of interest, especially if you're doing your own lit review, because I always look and see studies cited, interesting points in studies cited, and then I can go and say, well, that looks like an interesting study or article. I think I'll go back here and look in the, oh yes. So not only can I verify the validity of these sources, the accuracy of the sources, but I can go and get the actual article and I can look it up. So doing a lit review is something like being a detective. You are looking for clues. And I see some names here, EPs, that I recognize, and I see, okay, these are peer-reviewed journal articles. Okay, good. Even though this study was in what year? 2003. All right. It doesn't have to be. There are some great studies that are 10, 20, and even 30 years old. So just because a study is a little bit older, don't discount it and say, oh, that's 20 years old. Data is data. But you always have to read and get a sense of what the data speaks. So, as I said, the lit review is important in setting the question in a theoretical context. Thus said, oftentimes, many of us skip the lit review. We'll go back and read it if it's of interest, but we go right to the research questions. And this is important. The research questions after the abstract are probably the most important thing. And let's take a look at the research questions. And usually there's not this many. Does instruction carried out in a learning disability resource room significantly improve reading and spelling achievement? Over 3 years. Does instruction, learning resource room, improve reading and spelling? 6 years. Okay. Notice I'm not reading every word. Hopefully you can fill in the blanks. Learning resource affect the verbal performance IQ? 3 years. IQ scores? 6 years. So verbal and performance IQs. And is there a relationship between reading achievement of children with LD and duration and the method of reading instruction? That is very important. We are going to answer those questions specifically. Now, the method tells me how they went about stuff, how they got stuff, etc., etc. What is of interest here is this one right here. I wanted to get a sense. It is a mixed method. It uses mostly quantitative data, but also qualitative data. Quantitative data, numbers, scores, yup. And many people, like the US Department of Education, think that if it can't be quantified, it doesn't exist. Only quantitative research can be used to identify causal relationships between things, and that is just a limited view of educational research. It's a silly, simple view of what educational research is. What is of interest is they also include qualitative research. Why is that important? Because numbers without context are often meaningless. The qualitative aspect helps us understand and put these numbers in some sort of context. All right, so let's look at the participants or the subjects. Sample size, okay, 230 students, 164, good, adequate sample size. If I want to go back more, I can go back. And usually what happens, if I'm reading through this, and something sounds a little fishy or seems a little fishy or not quite true, then I'll go back and I'll analyze these sections more carefully. The biggest thing with participants is when I'm comparing one group to another, are the groups comparable? Did they get the same type of treatment or input? That's important. Was the population self-selected? For example, if here's a good example of that. Research finds that students with high phonemic awareness scores in kindergarten achieve more in reading in first grade. Okay, that's fine. So some people say, oh, it's causal. Phonemic awareness causes reading achievement. However, it was found that those students who score higher on phonemic awareness tests in kindergarten have come from households where parents talk to them more, read more books, and engage in literacy types of activities. So the phonemic awareness scores is an effect of the cause, which is reading at home. So it's a self-selected population. You can't compare scores because the comparison, that's a bad analogy, but the groups were not comparable. The one group who had high scores, a group that didn't have high scores, well, they weren't really comparable because what went on before the test was different. In the same way, comparing private schools with public schools is not comparable. You can't compare sample sizes that are different. Public schools, everyone gets on the bus. Private schools can be selected in who they allow to come in. So this is what we look for with participants often. Are the sample sizes equal? Is it a self-selected population or some such thing? But this is when we go back and play detective. All right, criteria employed by special education. Oh, I may want to go look at that of interest. That's always of interest to see how students are selected, identified for placement. But I'm not going to go into that now. I can go back there. Oh, the procedures, how you went about stuff, and what were the measures and what data were collected. All right, we see that IQ scores are being measured. That is one of the measures, and it gives us the type of measures. And also a verbal IQ score for something. Reading achievement scores, yes, 2 types of tests. Okay, very good, and it gives us all this information, and these are recognized measures, and they're validated, and you can get all that stuff, okay? So they're not just using some kooky stuff, some kooky measure that they decide. And by the way, this is off on a tangent a bit, but research is not research unless and until it is subjected to blind peer review, and most often this is published in an academic journal. Research is different from collecting data. A lot of for-profit companies will collect their own data and say, see, our program is research-based. Our research proves that. Well, it doesn't prove anything other than that you're trying to make money and you collected some data. Research is not research unless and until it has been subjected to blind peer review. The blind peer review process focuses a lot on the methodology. How were the data collected? How were it analyzed? Is there anything fishy here? Are the sample sizes equal? That's why we have blind peer review. It's not that we don't trust people. We trust researchers who are all trying to get book deals and tenure and whatnot. No, we trust them. This is just one of the filters. One of the filters that helps us understand and evaluate research. So the high prestige journals aren't going to just publish anything. They're high prestige because of the peer review process. Okay. In addition, quantitative data, qualitative data were obtained by interviewing 17 LD teachers. All right, 17. This helps us, that's a pretty good number of teachers. This helps us put the quantitative data in some sort of context. Now, will this research study prove anything? Research in education doesn't prove anything. Research supports or doesn't support hypothesis, and each research study is a dot in a dot-to-dot picture, which is a theory. A theory is a way of explaining a set of facts and understanding phenomena. Alexa, timer off. Alexa, alarm off. Pardon me, sorry to interrupt this very important thing. And I even lost my point there. Oh yeah, 17 special ed teachers gives us a sense of putting that quantitative data in some sort of context. It helps us understand, and you're going to see how that's understood. All right. So I'm skimming, looking at this stuff, knowing that, okay, I can go back. And the results, this is the important thing. So abstract, research question, results. Many people, if you're reading just a skim version, a light version, they go right to there. Abstract, research question, results. Some people like to then go more in depth and look at the methodology, and to go even more in depth than that, the lit review. But few people read it front to end. Very few people. All right, research question number 1. Does instruction carried out and learning disciplines significantly improve reading and spelling achievement? Now that word significantly is important. Statistical significance means the difference is more than can be explained by chance. The difference has to be statistically significant. Otherwise, we could say, well, it was just coincidence or chance. So does it improve reading and spelling over 3 years? Okay, let's see if we can find some data there. Oh, the data showed LD instruction in research did not significantly improve reading comprehension or word recognition. In fact, word recognition had deteriorated after the 3-year, even though the decrease was not statistically significant. And it directs us to, directs us to table number 3. So we go to table number 3. Okay, we see this. We see comprehension, initial, post, not significant, even though it's going down. Word recognition, initial, post, going down, but not significant. Spelling, initial, post, yes, the difference was statistically significant. They decreased in spelling. All right, question number 2, same thing over a period of 6 years. Okay, did not improve comprehension and word recognition, declined in comprehension and even though the loss was not statistically significant. All right, and that brings us to table 4. So we scoot down to table 4, initial, post. Here we have comprehension, decreased. Okay. Word recognition, decreased, not significant, not significant. Spelling, decrease. It was a statistically significant difference. Something's going on there. Something's going on. All right, affect the verbal and performance IQ scores of students. All right, okay, decreased, okay, not significant, go to table 5. All right, verbal and performance IQ. Initial, post, decrease, not significant, not significant, not significant. So they didn't go up, they actually went down, but they didn't go down in a statistically significant way. All right, that was research question 3. Research question 4 is the same question, except it looks at 6 years, and it sends us to table 6. We go right to the table. This is why people like reading quantitative research. It's a little easier. Reading qualitative is a little bit more messier and harder to get a handle on. But qualitative research is good because it provides context. All right. Verbal IQ scores. Pre-post went down and the difference was statistically significant. So verbal IQ related to, found on a reading achievement test. All right. Something happened that made these scores go down. Performance, same thing, but not significant. Full scale, not significant, although they did decrease. All right, this looks at the duration of time, research question number 5, and the method. I'm really not that interested in duration of time, but I am interested in the method. Let's see what we can find out there, okay? The method of instruction. I'm interested in that. All right. Phonics-based strategies, all right. Herman Phonics and Norton Gillingham, we know both of these are programs that have absolutely no research base. They collect data, but they don't do research. Versus eclectic. And we don't really know what eclectic is. And that's one of the problems when trying to compare skills-based with whole language or eclectic or other. That the skills-based follow the direction, you can say, well, this is exactly what it is. Eclectic and whole language is not a method. Whole language is a theory of how students learn language best. And teachers use their own teaching expertise and use a variety of strategies in a whole language approach. Anyway, let's take a look at that. And it's going to direct us to, where's the findings? Oh, that's ours. Okay, it's going to direct us to, okay, it's going to direct us to, here we go, Phonics Group. Okay, and this is done a little bit differently. Comprehension pre-post went down in phonics and went down in recognition. Eclectic, that went down, that stayed the same. No significant differences there. All right, so there were no significant differences there. Same with the 3. That was the 6-year. I get them all mixed up. You get the idea. All right, the findings from the interviews, and this is why it is so important to have qualitative data. Those who believed in the use of eclectic methods indicated that on the whole, linking sounds to the printed word was their major instructional goal, even though instructional strategies used to accomplish the goal varied. In a few cases, however, an inability to understand text that is being read was the most serious problem. So even though they had an eclectic view, it seems like they still viewed reading as sounding out words and engaged in mostly low-level instruction, and that will be important, as we'll see. They utilize worksheets, 18 use phonics-based, and 82% used an eclectic. None of the teachers interviewed indicated favoring any particular comprehension instructional strategy in addressing the needs. They didn't favor any. Probably it indicates, well, they didn't know any ways to teach comprehension. They didn't know strategies for teaching comprehension. And then the discussion, and this is interesting as well. Results of this study in elementary users who are instructors failed to make significant gains in areas of word recognition, reading comprehension, spelling, and measured intelligence, IQ. All right. To be more specific, the present study indicated that in the long term, placement and instruction in resource rooms can actually have a deleterious effect on spelling and verbal intelligence scores. Notice that this says it doesn't prove that. because studies don't prove, it just indicates or it may suggest. The significant decline in spelling was unusual and calls for an explanation. Again, this is why we have the discussion. All right. Failure here to maintain normal vocabulary growth. Decline may be related to decline in verbal IQ, which could be a failure to maintain normal vocabulary growth. It is well documented that poor readers read much less than normal readers, and this in the long run impedes vocabulary growth. As well, they move up in the grades. Students with LD will therefore encounter many words with they do not know. Okay, so these new words lead students to spell phonetically, resulting in spelling errors. So this is a great explanation. The difference could be that students in these resource rooms read less, encounter fewer words. And we know from other research that volume of reading is linked to increases in comprehension, word identification, fluency, and conceptual knowledge. When you're sentenced to an LD resource room, you get far less opportunities to engage in that which helps you, which is independent reading, volume of reading. It is apparent that the LD program, as is practiced today, does not have much to write home about. The reasons for this failure may include crowded resource, and you have this ability in the discussion part. It's where you can postulate. The discussion section allows you to postulate. The results, you are just describing the data. This is what the data said. You keep your opinions out of that, out of the data collection. So let's just review again. I read the abstract. I was interested in the question and the results. That invited me and to look at the research questions specifically, the methods, the data, what data were collected, how, the participants, the type of instruction they had, okay, and how they were identified, and the procedures. Then I went to answer the specific results, and the results is just the data. They're just describing the data. And they describe the findings here, but then they point us to a nice table, findings for each question, a nice table. This is why people like quantitative research, because it's cut and dry. They have nice tables. You can say not significant or significant. Remember, statistical significance. To draw any conclusions, the difference has to be statistically significant. Means greater than could happen by chance. That's what statistical significance means. All right, you have heard me think through how one goes about reading and analyzing a quantitative research article, and I apologize, my Alexa alarm went off in the middle of this, but I didn't want to stop and start over again.